Senior Research Fellow. Chelsea started her career as an Aboriginal health worker in southeast Queensland and has been working there for 20 years. She currently has an ARC grant in examining how race and racism operate within the health system, and she's fast becoming one of the recognised leaders both in Australia and internationally in this space. Can you please make welcome Dr. Bond?
Sorry. Just for you fellas that are sitting at the back on the floor, there's heaps of seats up here if you want to grab a seat. Anyway, thanks Greg for that wonderful introduction. I want to first start by acknowledging the unceded lands of the Larrakia mob and always the warm welcome that you fellas give us here. I want to especially thank Sister Donna Murray for the invitation to speak this afternoon. I also want to, in the context of 10 years of making a difference, I just want to honour the legacy of Donna in IHA and for all of your work and your leadership. It is my first IHA conference ever, but I was trying to think about the theme of making a difference. And so today I want to talk about the difference that we as black health professionals make. And I should acknowledge that this is a yarn that I shared with, or actually it's a provocation, I guess, that I took to the black nurses and midwives at the Katzenham conference last year, and also to our black doctors at the AIDA conference last year. And so I hope that this same provocation is of use to other black health professionals as well. As is protocol, I want to start with a story of my past. And pictured here is my Auntie Jean Wadigo. She's my grandfather's sister, and he's pictured here with my nana. She's an Aboriginal South Nullah woman from northern New South Wales. Now, as a child, Auntie Jean was that black relative that Dad would frequently boast about. That relative who defied the odds and showed what was possible at a time when it was considered impossible. Did you know, my father would say countless times, your Auntie Jean was once acting matron at the Royal Brisbane Hospital. Now, I have few memories of Auntie Jean as she passed when I was a young child. Sister Wadigo, by all accounts, was a very staunch and strict woman, which is kind of in keeping with the tradition of nurses and black women of that time and of now. My mother told the story of giving birth to my elder sister in the early 70s at the Mater Hospital, and the paediatrician inquiring as to her last name of Wadigo. She asked whether there was any relation to Sister Wadigo. Indeed, Mum said, this child is her first great niece. He then nervously joked that he would take extra care of them because he wouldn't want to suffer the wrath of Sister Wadigo. Because of her, Auntie Jean or Sister Wadigo, Mum knew that they were in good hands. And it's these good hands that I want to pay tribute to today, the black health professional. My speaking position as a health professional is as an Aboriginal health worker and liaison officer who operated in tertiary and primary healthcare settings in southeast Queensland, requiring to advocate on behalf of other black fellas from the position of the lowest rung in the health workforce. Today my advocacy for better health continues as a researcher, working not in a hospital but in the academy. In honouring the 10 years of making a difference, I want to speak to the legacy of the black health professional. I want to speak to the strength of the black health professional, and specifically the strength that we're required to summon in a workplace that is meant to care, but doesn't always. I want to speak to the conundrum and contradiction facing the black health professional in their attempts to cultivate a culturally safe healthcare in the colony. I want to draw on the work of black psychiatrist, revolutionary and philosopher Frantz Fanon. Fanon, of course, in his medical career worked in Algeria in the 1950s during the Algerian Revolution. As a black psychiatrist, he was responsible for treating both the psychological distress of the soldiers and officers of the French army who carried out torture in order to suppress anti-colonial resistance, as well as the trauma suffered by the Algerian torture victims. Now, such a predicament aptly captures the conundrums facing a black health professional who operates in the lands of which the sovereignty of its first peoples has never been ceded. The black health professional today is not simply working in the colony, they are still working on the frontier. During his time, Fanon realises that he cannot continue to aid French efforts to put down the decolonisation movement, and he resigned his position at the hospital. In describing the provision of healthcare in the colonial context, he argued, medical science and concern for one's health have always been proposed or imposed by the occupying power. In the colonial situation, going to see the doctor, the administrator, the constable, or the mayor are identical moves. At Fanon's time, his presence as a black health professional in the health system was relatively rare. But even in our greater presence with more numbers, it doesn't undermine the health system as an apparatus of colonial control, which continues to surveil black bodies and compels them to conform and comply. Fanon speaks to the reality that regardless of what type of health professional we are, caring or not, we are effectively agents of the state. What has been done to black bodies in this country in the interest of protecting us, of saving us, of easing our passing, has all been articulated through a health and medical discourse, which made it plausible and rational. The imposition of health checks, in some cases compulsory ones, is just one example of this. The system rewards itself for surveilling with such intensity black bodies. And what's interesting, there's no actual evidence to suggest that health checks reduce population health inequalities. But we do it anyway. Now, Fanon's story and experience indicates the limitations of the black health professional in our ability to provide culturally safe care. Because it's not about our practice, but rather the power of the institutions upon the colonised. So I want to speak to this contradiction of culturally safe care and what are effectively unsafe institutions located within an inherently racist society. What conditions can we possibly create as black health professionals in which a culturally safe utopia could exist for us and for our clients? Typically we think about culturally safe care as experienced by clients in our care, but today I want us to think about cultural safety as it applies to you in your job, because there is often the least care given to the care provider. So my focus today is on you and not the people you care for. Now, to speak about the black health professional is to enter a particular racialised terrain. Our presence is almost always a contradiction as it transcends even our own imaginings of what has been possible for blackfellas in the colony. We are the first in family to go to university, the first in family to receive one's wages, the first in family to buy a home, the first in family to be considered human and professional at the same time. The pathway to health professional typically has had far deeper transformative implications for us mob than many of our non-Indigenous colleagues. Health has typically not just been an occupation or a career path, it's been the vehicle which many Indigenous leaders have emerged, or which much emancipatory action has been instigated by. It's more than just a job, and it's about more than just care. So while transformative for us, our families and our communities, our bodies have been read as disruptive as health professionals within the healthcare system. And it's here I want to refer to Lisa's story, as authored by Professor Morton Robinson, our leading critical race and whiteness scholar. Morton Robinson was asked to be an expert witness for a case of racial discrimination that was lodged in the Anti-Discrimination Tribunal by an Aboriginal nurse in North Queensland. Morton Robinson describes a series of events experienced by Lisa as articulated within her affidavit with her permission. In drawing upon Lisa's story and Morton Robinson's account of it, I wish to acknowledge their labour, which has enabled us to think more deeply about our position within the health system as black health professionals. Morton Robinson notes, the workforce can be a place of great stress and anxiety because of the added burden of being the known and known stranger in a space where we are both in and out of place. We have to contend with white people's knowledge and representations of and about us. In this way, we are already known by them. While Indigenous people know this about white people, we also know that our knowledges about ourselves have very little impact on the work environment because we are not in control. Instead, we have to endure the white gaze and all of its manifestations as we try to earn a living for our families. This white gaze is something I've been keenly aware of as an Aboriginal health professional, having worked within the health system. Discursively, our bodies are read, and when they are seen out of place, they are remade to mean something that makes their presence all of a sudden make sense. The black health professional, despite our growing numbers, can still be read as an anomaly. Our presence is typically read as aberrational, unusual, and requiring explanation. Typically, our presence in the health system gets explained away in particular kinds of ways by certain tropes which operate to keep intact whiteness as the norm from which all others deviate. So I've come up with my own little schema in which I believe frames the presence of the black health professional in the health system. It's kind of a work in progress. Trope 1, is the superhuman Aborigine. They are the first. They are the ones that are so superhuman they managed to break through the glass ceiling. They defied all odds and expectations, withstanding and overcoming any number of obstacles to break even, to get in the door. They are in the health system through sheer black stubbornness and determination, because they weren't granted a thing. They may not necessarily testify to the virtues of the health system, but the superhuman professional tells us that anything is possible, and at times this narrative sustains us when we find ourselves in unsustainable places. Our tales of woe pale in comparison to theirs, and we often check ourselves for not being as tough as those who came before us. Sometimes it means we berate ourselves for not being superhuman like them, as if a job in the health system should require us to have superhuman powers. Trope 2 is the role model. This role is reserved for the articulate, aesthetically pleasing, cosmetically apparent Aborigine. The role model Aborigine typically has yet to do anything substantial, either as a clinician or as a leader, but they were operationalised to encourage aspirations amongst the native folk to join the profession. They are literally the poster child for the health system, and their perfect bodies and their perfect teeth show us that the health system is a truly wonderful place to work, that our presence is welcome, and that our body will remain intact in that place. This stock image here of the ethnic nurse cannot be any more illustrative of this fact, and this particular ethnic nurse has been used in Indigenous health branding and messaging. Any black or black-white body will do to keep intact the supposed safety of the health system, to maintain the claims of whiteness as virtuous and benevolent to the ethnics, assuring us of our ability to become just like them. The third one is the liaison officer. Despite being qualified, the black health professional in this instance is seen either as the assistant to white knowing or alternatively the sole primary carer of non-white bodies. The black health professional for many is still imagined to be the liaison officer, and it's a thing. When Lisa became too problematic, she was sent to the Indigenous health space to work amongst her people. My husband was a senior constable for some 15 years in the same community, yet people reimagined the stripes on his epaulets as bright yellow, referring to him as a PLO. And not that there's anything wrong with that, because I was a liaison officer. But it was interesting how it was his black body that enabled them to see those yellow epaulets that just weren't there. And again, it's another form of subjugation that the black body experiences in the health system. And of course, there are those that think to serve black bodies is a subordinate role within the health system. But that is the power of race, that the black nurse or health professional might come to think that working exclusively on healing black bodies is somehow a lesser kind of labour, because black people are a lesser kind of people. Finally, there is the exceptional Aborigine. We all know them. We've all been called one. The exceptional Aborigine is known as the esteemed colleague and/or respected leader. They are known as the exception to the rule because of their excellence, but what makes them an exception is not their capabilities, but the reading of their black body is capable. The exceptional Aborigine is the black health professional who is committed to get on with doing their job, who engages in transformative work every day while retaining said job and standing within their own discipline. And of course, you're all exceptional Aborigines, and that's the irony of it really. We know black excellence is our norm and our expectation for ourselves. We are affirmed in our excellence not via white knowing, but instead via black being. Pictured here is a painting by Basquiat called Irony of Negro Policeman, in which he questioned how a black man could ever be a police officer, how black people could work to enforce rules that were meant to enslave them. If we take Fanon's position that our position as health professionals is just like the administrator, the mayor or the constable, then we too must ask of ourselves this question. How do we actively resist being used or seen as that token? How do we retain a sense of self, our own sense of self and purpose in institutions that have long dehumanised us? I'm not sure exactly, but I do know in not being critically conscious to the ways in which our bodies are racialised inside and outside of the disciplines that discipline us, the institutions that employ us and the society which we are forced to live in, is that we risk compelling our bodies to contort in ways that are simply impossible. That we punish ourselves for not being good enough or strong enough. That we punish our loved ones when we come home because of the dehumanising encounters we experienced or witnessed at work. In telling the truth about how our bodies are read by them, it enables us to contest the lies that have been inscribed upon our bodies and minds, but also to understand the damage that it's doing. It is not mere coincidence that for almost every condition of which we have data on, excluding diseases of old age, that we get sick sooner, die earlier, regardless of the degrees that we hold or the pay packet we take home. The violence of the economy upon black bodies is real, and even more for those who are situated within its institutions, even in health. Now, I'll confess, I grew up aspiring to be the superhuman black, just like Auntie Jean. That race didn't matter, that I could outperform and outrun and outachieve because this imagined possibility had been imprinted upon my mind and my soul by my father at a kitchen table. There was a success, a blue sky moment that W. Du Bois talked about in his articulation of double consciousness, which had an appeal to me. Du Bois states, "It's a peculiar sensation, this double consciousness, this sense of always looking at oneself through the eyes of others, of measuring one's soul by the tape of a world that looks on in amused contempt and pity. And yet being a problem is a strange experience, peculiar even for one who has never been anything else. But like Du Bois, I've since come to no longer want to be superhuman. I no longer want to be the assistant. I don't want to be the role model, and I don't want to be the exception." He states, "Then it dawned upon me with a certain suddenness that I was different from the others, or like mayhap in heart and life and longing, but shut out from their world by a vast veil. I had therefore no desire to tear down that veil to creep through. I held all beyond it in contempt, and lived above it in a region of blue sky and great wandering shadows. That sky was bluest when I could beat my mates at exam time, or beat them at a foot race, or even beat their stringing heads. Alas, with all the years, all this fine contempt began to fade, for the worlds I longed for and all the dazzling opportunities were theirs, not mine. So what role is left for us then? What we learn from Lisa's story is when we refuse to adhere to the role assigned to us, we could be moved around and moved along. Morton Robinson notes how the staff operationalised a race-blind discourse to construct Lisa as the problem, and their possessiveness signalled to Lisa that she had no proprietary claims in the space in which she worked or to be a nurse. She could be moved at their discretion. Now, I don't think that we're agentless in this, that we have no power and no choice, but there is a power that's enacted over the black health professional that we must be cognisant of. In doing so, we can then strategise our response, our reply. And while there is a schema that might frame our presence, I think there's a truer schema in terms of our response. So I want to turn to the fictional novel from African-American writer Paul Beatty, called The Sellout. For those who haven't read it, the lead character is raised by a single father in a ghetto on the outskirts of LA. And he exposes him to some racially charged psychological studies to test out how race works. The studies are meant to inform a memoir which will solve the family's financial woes, but sadly his father is accidentally killed in a police shootout, which is the trauma of being a black subject, and his father's funeral bill. It's so familiar. Anyway, before he died, his father, an African-American psychologist aptly named F.K. Me, hypothesised that different types or stages of black identity and being, and I wanted to quickly take you through them. Stage 1, the neophyte Negro according to Beatty's character. Here the black person exists in a state of pre-consciousness. The neophyte Negro is afraid of his own blackness, a blackness that feels incapable, infinite and less than. He or she wants to be anything but black. The neophyte Negro actually wants to be white, sees themselves as white and they actually think that white is right. They are the colourblind black fellow who wants more than to be like them, but to actually be them. Stage 2 blackness is the capital B black, and according to Beatty, this distinguishing feature of stage 2 blackness is a heightened awareness of race. Here race is all-consuming, but in a more positive way. This is the kind of black is beautiful form of blackness, the black and deadly form of blackness. It's a claim and a contestation, but it doesn't necessarily change our location. Stage 3 is blackness is race transcendentalism, a collective consciousness that fights oppression and seeks serenity. Stage 3 black folks are the woman on your left and the man on your right. It's about overcoming racial oppression and making everything right, as if there is such a place where everything will be right. Rather than a destination, we find ourselves on a constant journey, the constant struggle for serenity. But stage 4 is an unmitigated blackness, and Beattie's character is not sure what that is. But he says whatever it is, it doesn't sell. On the surface, as unmitigated blackness is a seemingly unwillingness to succeed. It's the serious black actor, it's a night in jail, it's simply not caring. Unmitigated blackness is coming to the realisation that as messed up and meaningless as it all is, sometimes it's the nihilism that makes life worth living. Stage 4 unmitigated blackness is burn it down. It's refusing to measure up. It's refusing to comply, adhere or compete. It is the closest thing to sovereignty that I can imagine. Now, I'm not here to proclaim or police anyone's blackness, rather I want to provoke a more deliberative, critical consciousness around the enactment of our blackness and our sovereignty within colonial institutions that we are employed within. What is our criteria, our marker of success on our terms? How might we reimagine what that means for us? And it's again that I want to return to Lisa's story. Spoiler alert for those who have not read that article. Morton Robinson concludes, Lisa chose an action which demanded a great deal of strength and courage in lodging a Racial Discrimination Act, a claim against the people and institution which she had appealed to be included in and accepted by for so long. But standing on her sovereign ground as a black nurse meant that Lisa is no longer a nurse. Much like Fanon, these tales of the black health professional don't offer the culturally safe, happy ending that we are seeking. But is that okay? I don't know, to quote Beattie's character, sometimes it is the nihilism that makes life worth living. I wonder whether refusal is as necessary an action for the black health professional as is cultural safety. I wonder about the toll on black bodies when we are forced to carry the brunt of colonial violence while at the same time be the healer of that same violence that is inflicted upon us also. Now, of course, I'm sounding a bit nihilistic, and perhaps the health system isn't as bad as I'm making out. Perhaps. But there is something going on within our health system that we cannot simply behave our way out of. The high rates of discharge against medical advice and the preventable deaths from black fellows who have been denied access to health care tells us that the system lacks care for us. How can we talk about a health system free of racism if we don't attend to the racism that we encounter within it as health professionals? I'm by no means suggesting at your national conference that you should all quit tomorrow or that it's all hopeless. But Lisa's story should not be the only story that we tell. And I wonder, in 50 years or so, what stories will your great nieces or nephews have to tell about you, the unmitigated black health professional? What will be your legacy? Thank you.